The next thing we're going to be doing is looking at styling these buttons using CSS3, and that will enable us to work with things like gradients and drop shadows, among other things. The easiest way for me to explain this to you is to take an existing example and walk you through it line by line. So I've already opened up the final version of our file, and you can find that, of course, by going to File, Open, and then navigating to Chapter 7 and looking at the finished index page. Well, the finished index page happens to have layout.css. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see, not actually at the bottom, but close to the bottom, there are some elements in here that say CSS3 button styling. I'm going to take the comment, the CSS3 button class, and there's also a second one, CSS3 button 2 class. So let's take all of that information, Command X, or rather you could just copy it, Command C or Control C on a PC. I don't need this anymore, so I'm just going to close that. And then I'll go back to my index page. This is the start file. I'll go to the layout, and then down at the very bottom, I'm going to Command V or Control V, paste in that information. Now, if we were to look at that, automatically you can see that there's been some changes in here. The buttons, which, if we look in our source code, already had a custom class applied to it. So here's a button with the class of CSS3 button 2, and I think I'll change them, 1 to button and 1 to button 2. So now if we refresh, go back to our design view, you can see that I now have 2 buttons right here that look quite nice and are working exactly the way I want them to. So how do we get these to do what we want them to? Well, let's go to our layout.css and let's take a look. First of all, I've created a custom class, and this custom class says CSS3 button. So let's walk through each and every line. Font family is Arial, and that's because the text inside here is using Arial. Font size determines how big that text will be. The color of that text is determined as well. Now there's margin on the top, meaning let's push away from the outside and distance ourselves from some of this text. That's good. Padding 10 and 20. Remember, this is shortcut. 10 indicates 10 padding on the top and bottom, so there's 10 pixels of padding on the inside of this button, and 20 on the left and right. 20 on this side, 20 on that side. Then comes the interesting information. Here where it says background, it's not just a simple background color that we're using, but rather we are introducing a linear gradient. And this linear gradient will start at the top with this specific color, and it will end with this specific color. So that's giving us the transition, the gradient that we see right here. You'll notice that in CSS3 button 2, there's a different transition with different colors. Also, take note that we also have to repeat that information specifically for WebKit. It's just written in a different way than it is for Mozilla. So here it defines a linear gradient starting at the left top, ending left bottom. It starts with this color and it ends with this color. Pretty simple, nothing really crazy. Then of course there is the border radius in Mozilla and WebKit, and there's a border on this so that we have this little blackish outline. There is also a Mozilla box shadow. Unlike text shadow, which is specifically used for text, this one is for boxes. And as you can see here, Mozilla and WebKit are writing them in the same fashion. Notice we can also indicate more than one box shadow, one for the outside, and this one is on the inset. In other words, we're creating an inner shadow, and that's the one that we see right here. The percentage amounts that you see here are written in decimals. So 0.5 means 50% visibility, and 0.9 means 90%. We do that for Mozilla browsers, and we do that for WebKit as well. And then we have a text shadow specifically for the text that we are working with right here. If you don't like those colors, you can change the RGB values right here as well, making them darker if need be. So we've done the same thing for CSS button 2. The only difference is we are changing the start and ending color. Remember, if you want to do the same thing, just don't forget to change that not only for Mozilla, but also for the WebKit values. So that's pretty much it. How to create a really beautifully styled button inside of CSS3.